I'm Tom from Rise from Your Grave.
Hello and welcome. So, for the audience at home, this is kind of a spoiler. Tom's already been on the show. The episode just hasn't
I
been
have.
released yet, and I already know him. We've been friends for a while and talking back and forth. And if you could just introduce yourself.
I play keyboards in Alice.
My name is Anna Maria, and I am the founder and vocalist in the band Bajra.
What was the initial start?
Yeah, so we all have pretty storied histories.
I was just bored during COVID. Did a little demo, put it out, and it was pretty well received by the community. And
always had a thing for horror punk and stuff.
Something that started with me and a laptop during quarantine, and just like, oh yeah, you know, all those times I said, if only I didn't have to work my job all the time, and now like I could have time to do that. Well, now this is that.
All right, and if you could just introduce yourself to the fine folks at home, I'd really appreciate it.
Hi guys, I'm Tom from Rise from Your Grave.
Let's start by talking about the history of your project. How did this all happen?
So to make a very long story short, I was in quite a few bands many years ago. One of which was a punk band and some metal bands and stuff like that. And a lot of the guys that I usually had collaborated with, who were very great musicians and awesome friends, they've all moved away or we've kind of lost touch and things like that. So in my effort to want to continue to make music, especially fun music that I would enjoy, I really got the itch to make some horror punk. I've been listening to it forever. I mean, as far back as I can remember listening to heavy music. And I just thought, well, that's, it hits all the things that I really like. I'm a thrash guy at heart, but I love fast guitars. I love, vocal harmony and great singing. I love fast drums. I just like that. It just hits all my buttons. So in about 2015, 2016, I got together with a friend of mine and we started working on some tracks. And it's just sort of evolved from there. And in about 2017 is when we released our first record, which was Arise. And it really started out with that record as just the plans of like, let's make some music. Let's put some stuff out there and just kind of see where things go. And if it continues to be fun, we'll just keep continuing to do it. And so I learned a lot very quickly about how easy and not easy it is to get music out there and to get people to hear it and things like that. As I'm sure most bands or most people trying to put some music out there know far too well. But yeah, it's evolved from there. We did our second album with the help of actually the drummer from my former band was on that album, and just sort of been evolving as things go on. So it's been exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, like you brought up the fact that you come from both a punk and like a metal background, and I was gonna say that's something I can really hear in the way you guys are playing, especially in the first releases that you've put out. I can definitely hear the influence of the 80s thrash bands mixed in with punk and stuff. It's very, very tight playing as well, and kind of cool riff transfers between speeds in some of the songs.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I've always tried to make that. I've always tried to make that apparent, because one of the first genres of heavy music that I got into was thrash metal, and because of how that stuff is played and how much of it I listened to at a very young age, it just sort of shapes the way you want to hear stuff. You want to hear it fast. You want to hear it. You want to hear it well played. You want to feel that intensity, and I have always tried to make sure that I don't forget that on each record that we do.
For sure. And well, you also mentioned the vocal harmony aspect of horror punk that you really enjoy, and that's something I noticed as well. That's a core feature, like you were saying, of your music. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here for the interview. It was that interesting combination of punk and melodicism and thrash metal all put into one, with some Lovecraftian elements in the storytelling, I noticed. And that was just, I love that. That was clever.
Yeah, I in the one of the bands that I was in many years ago, I was actually in a power metal band. So it was super important that I knew how to sing well and accurately, because we were doing a lot of stuff where, you know, I was hitting very notes that I'm not hitting in some of this music, as you could imagine, but some very high notes, sirens and stuff like that. And I was doing a lot of death metal vocals as well, sort of like Into Eternity. We were in a general sense trying to accomplish something similar to that. And so it was super important to me when we were making that music to make sure that I could do it well and do it right. And that's one of those things that I just kind of carried along with me, where it's like the fast playing and the intensity is important, but also making something that people will want to sing and listen to later. That's very important to me, because I know, like, those are the kinds of songs, you know, when I'm listening to horror punk now, like, those are the songs that I really latch on to. And I love that fast aggressive stuff, but the ones that I find myself going back and listening to the most are the ones that I can sing along to in the car on my way home from work.
Speaking of like songwriting and stuff, let's talk a little bit about the inspiration, like instrumentally. What, I know you said you come from a punk and, you know, like a metal, like a thrash metal background. Do you think that, are you a theory guy? Let me just put that out there. Are you a theory guy first and foremost, or no?
You know what's great about this is that I'm currently playing bass in what I can only describe as a straight up rock and roll band, and I play with some of the best musicians. All of these guys are great, and as a matter of fact, all of them are in Rise from Your Grave, playing different instruments, but they're fantastic players, and they know so much about theory and song structure and things like that. And like, if I can keep a song in one key, I feel like I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
I try to stick to that in some bands. I was in a punk band called the Communist Neckties, and a lot of the songs that we did were what some people had described as musical surgery. You find a riff that you like, and then you cut this one out and you just throw that one next to it and just keep throwing stuff until the song's over. But I did realize that I was going to need to get better at songwriting as I started doing all this and learning more about theory as I went on. Because it's great to come up with a nice harmony, but if it doesn't make sense over top of what you're playing, it just it doesn't work. Yeah, if you've got a 4-part harmony over a guitar part that doesn't match the rest of it, it just doesn't work. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on how you think of it, I had to learn a lot of that along the way.
Oh, no, for sure. What I was actually going to say about all that is that, like, whether you know it or not, right? Whether you know theory or not, your music is melodically interesting. I feel it's melodically interesting. And I've been noticing a pattern, and I don't know if it just comes from like the metal background or not, but guys who tend to have played, whether it's thrash metal or, you know, power metal or whatever else they've been playing, they may not even know the theory behind it, but they bring elements of melodicism into what they're doing that just work. And like, I really appreciated that. That's why I was going to ask you if you knew theory or whatever. I've just noticed this pattern of like really tight playing. Usually the song structures are fairly well done, and not necessarily always the simple verse chorus stuff, which perfectly fine, go for it, like, you know, whatever. But, you know, extended sections, things like that. And I did notice a little bit of that in your music, and again, like you said, it's the inescapable thing. You wanted to put that in there from your metal influences. I love 3-chord dirty punk rock, like, you know, with no knowledge or whatever, but like, when you can bring in that extra level of like, whether it's instinctual from what you've been doing or not, it adds a flavor that, you know, I wouldn't say it's more interesting, because there are great punk bands that are just like, let's go, you know, 3 chords.
Oh, absolutely.
Hit the wall. You know, sometimes the harmonies land better if you put a little effort into like,
absolutely. Yeah. And it's so funny to think about the idea of like, you know, when I first started writing this stuff, it was like, well, yeah, you know, I just want to make something fun and that kind of stuff. And like, it's that whole like hokey thing of like, well, it was the things we learned along the way, but like it really is. It really is. I feel like as I get further into making, you know, songs for Rise from Your Grave and stuff, I just find that I want to do that stuff more and more, because and a lot of the feedback that we get from our songs are, we loved, like, I love singing these songs. Somebody referred to the song I Am as an anthemic, and I thought, well, that really feels like, whether I knew it or not at the time, it feels like that's what I wanted. If that makes any sense. Because I've constantly wanted to be able to again have people sing those songs, and to hear somebody say that, I think was super important for me to not only sort of have an idea of where to go forward, but to understand what I had done as well. So I think that's pretty cool.
So let's talk about then the writing process, right? Sure. So how does a Rise from Your Grave song start? Is it instrumental? Is it vocal? Does it matter?
That's a great question. Sometimes, more recently, it's been a little of both. On our last album, Silence Out of Hell, a lot of the songs started off where, like, because vocals are really my instrument, and this is sort of a discussion that I've had with my bandmates in Second Guest and in Rise from Your Grave as well. Like, we always talk about, where does the inspiration come from? Like, what, you know, you always seem to work with what your instrument is. So our lead guitar player, Brandon, all of his ideas start with a guitar riff. Adam, our rhythm guitar player, is a fantastic piano player. And so everything that Adam comes up with seems to come from starting with the piano. And because I you know, took lessons and the vocals are really my instrument, a lot of my stuff starts as, okay, I have an idea of what I want this song to be about. You know, I come up with a phrase that I think gives me the idea of what this song is about. And then I just sit there like Scatman Carruthers and just work it out and see, okay, does this phrase, do these syllables in this order, do they create something that I find interesting? Okay, is it interesting? Okay, no, then we'll take a different phrase. We'll keep the topic, but we'll try a different phrase. And so things kind of work like that generally. And what I almost always try to do is start with the chorus. Because again, like we talked about earlier, my biggest thing is just wanting people to sing those hooks. And if I can start there, if I have a great idea to start there, everything else after that is easy. Because I know where everything needs to start. I know where it needs to go. I know how I'm going to want this to flow. If I can get a good chorus, I can build off of that infinitely. I mean, if I had a steady stream of choruses, there'd be a Rise from Your Grave album every 6 months.
For sure.
But yeah, a lot of it starts that way. And more recently, I'll be working on another song. And this happened actually just recently, the song that I'm working on currently. Got everything in, chorus sounds great, pre-chorus, all of the parts are there. I just need to come up with what I think will be an interesting verse to change over into sort of a happier sounding, a more major sounding pre-chorus. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to do something a little bit more minor, have it a little bit darker. And I start playing around. And now I've come up with an intro that doesn't fit this song. So now I've got a whole new intro with a whole new can of worms. So I have been buckling down in that I recorded this intro. I set up another Pro Tools session, recorded that intro, came back to that song, and I was like, okay, we have this. We'll work on this later. But let's finish this thing right now.
And that seems like it's the way, right? Like sometimes you just get that inspiration and you're like, nope, we got to get it right now. We'll come back. We'll mess with that later, but saving that and then we'll get to it.
It's one of the things that kills me. And it's happened several times. I'll be laying at bed at night, watching a YouTube video or something like that, getting ready to go to bed. And, I'll start to fall asleep and I have this great idea and I'm like, I'll remember it. And I don't know how many times I've lied to myself and said I'm going to remember it. And then I wake up and I'm like, how did it go? I don't know. I should have got up and recorded that, or at least recorded me like pretending to play a guitar riff into my phone.
Yeah,
like, beep,
yeah.
beep, 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 beep. Like that'll be easy to interpret tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hey, but it's a starting point, like
Yeah.
whatever it is. I'm an amateur musician. One of the things that I do as a musician that I found really helps, because I write for lyrics, guitar, all that stuff. I do everything poorly, is what I like to say.
Hey, I love that. I do that too.
Yeah. I've been writing a song every single day for a year, and I mean lyrically, a lot of them are garbage, but the fact
that's how it goes.
Yeah, like the fact that I'm doing it has helped me immensely, like just be able to get lyrics going, because you'll get what, like you were saying, that one piece is now an intro to a song, right? And so you move from these little things, these ideas jump from place to place to place. So even if you never use the initial idea you wrote down or recorded, like you were saying, talking to the phone or whatever, if you have a bank of that stuff you can pull from, oh, it's gold.
Absolutely. Hold on. I'm gonna show you the secrets. Let me see if I can find it. So all of these date back to at least February of 2020. These are all the unused recorded ideas that I've got. So there's plenty of them here. Those are just ones that I'll come up with in the car. I actually have one of those trying to think of like Ghost Adventures. Do you ever watch that show?
Yeah.
Like those ghost hunting shows, they have like those little EVP recorders.
Yeah.
Well, the reason they use them is because they sound like crap.
Yeah.
I bought one many years ago to do this exact thing with, to record ideas with, and so I have it sitting in my 2022 car has this like 2004 voice recorder sitting like right in the door in case I ever need to record something. But yeah, I mean, there's just and that's the thing, and like people, it's good to be inspired to make something, right? That's one thing, right? You're sitting around and you have an idea. That's great. But the important thing, and maybe there's musicians that want to start making some stuff that this can help. You also have to work at it. It's not just when the inspiration comes, oh, I'll figure it out once it hits me. Like and it sounds kind of, I don't know, maybe it sounds a little obnoxious that way, but like you do have to work at it. So even on days where I don't necessarily have something in the bank ready to start, or I know, I've listened to the song I'm working on, to and from work, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to work on whatever. I'll try to at least come back and mess around on the guitar a little bit and maybe come up with something. Maybe it doesn't work, maybe it does, but putting in the work regularly is a big thing that will help songwriting get easier, because it does make you better. You'll realize very quickly the things you do and don't like, and which seems like a weird thing to say, but when you're writing music, sometimes you write something and you're like, well, I don't really understand why I don't like that. It took me a long time to figure out some of that kind of stuff. So if I can parse that wisdom out, please take it.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about inspiration. Let's talk about I know you mentioned, again, thrash and punk, but who are the bands that you grew up listening to specifically that you think you pull from the most?
Oof.
I know.
Man, who I pull from the most?
Obviously it's your own sound, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, but we all take influences.
Absolutely. One of the bands, when I was growing up, like all of my metalhead friends, we would all, and these weren't new bands to anybody else but us, but we would always find a band that none of us had listened to before, and then that would be that guy's, like, oh yeah, he's the one that introduced us to Death, or he's the one that introduced us to Megadeath, or whatever. And one of those bands for me was Testament. We would just go out and we would buy CDs. And again, this is in the day where people bought CDs all the time. But we would go to, there's a place right near where we're from here in Pittsburgh. It was a place called oh damn it. it was like an FYE situation,
Yeah.
or like a Best Buy. I'm trying to think of the name of it now, and it's of course escaping me. But it was like a big Best Buy kind of place, and there was just, I mean, rows upon rows upon rows of music. And so we would find power metal bands like Falconer, and I feel like that's where a lot of my want to do those vocal harmonies came from. Or again, Testament was a band that I found like that, where I loved their guitar playing. Their guitar playing was so tight, and Chuck Billy's vocals were just like, I could only dream of sounding like that, and I would love it. His voice is just so like, it's thick and raspy, like it's just, and he's got melody and all that stuff. There's just so much about their music that I feel like really resonated with how I want to hear stuff. I love that. And of course, the Misfits were a big deal in terms of the horror punk stuff. Our bass player Davies is super into ska music, and that's where cool. Like a lot of the bass, like a lot of the bass parts and stuff. Davies has helped me write a couple of songs on some of the albums, but a lot of the bass playing, I'm not snagging it from directly, but like the way that the bass is played in ska music is so cool to me that I'm like, I want that. Like, I think it's in Bloody Hands off of Arise. If you listen closely, because the mix is kind of bad, but if you listen to the bass, there's some really cool stuff happening there. And that was sort of when I realized, like, yeah, I think this is what I wanted. I really want to get into the weeds with this and really explore, because you were playing a lot of 4-chord punk, so we got to make it flashy where we can. And I think there's a lot of bass parts, especially in the stuff I'm working on now, is like a lot of the bass stuff is very like, let's just go wild with it and see what happens.
Oh, for sure.
If it's too much, we'll scale it back. That's okay. But
I think that's
we'll
one
go
of
wild
the
first and then bring it back.
I think that's one of the coolest parts of like punk rock, right? Is like the lead guitar. Yes, there are solos in punk rock, but the lead guitar sometimes melodically, if you listen to a lot of songs underneath those 3-chord, let's go kind of songs, it's this beautiful bass line running these melodies and everything else. I love that. It's one of the reasons that I was so attracted to this kind of music in the first place.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I didn't listen to a bunch of punk when I first started listening to heavy music. It was only like sort of a couple of years after that I had really started to get into it. And it's not even, I mean, it's related, it's punk, but like MXPX, like a band I'm not like super into or anything now, but like as like a 12, 13-year-old kid, like some of those bass lines are awesome.
Oh, they're great. Awesome. Yeah. They were a band that really knew how to lay down a bass line, that really knew how to work melodically, both like in a vocal wise and like their chord progressions, everything through. And again, that's one of those down and dirty 3-chord punk songs, but they made it like work.
Oh yeah. It's impressive. It's impressive when you think about, like most people's perception of punk rock is, right, it's like 4 or 5 chords, and that's it. Like, okay, I mean, you're kind of right. You're not wrong, but you're not 100% right. There's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, man, like I just like, I love digging down into like the minute details of the stuff that I like, and I actively try to find out what it is that I like about it. Like, why do I like this? Is it because it's syncopated with the drums, or is it because this bass line is just super interesting, or whatever it is? Like, what is it about it that I like? And then I try to incorporate that, that idea into my own stuff. Okay. Where it's like, these complex bass lines. Okay, cool. It works in this section. Maybe it's a little bit too much in the next one. So we scale it back. Yeah. So it's a lot of give and take, where it's like, I have an idea that I want to try something that's a little different. Let's see if it works. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's an experimentation process too.
Absolutely. So, let's talk about other sources of inspiration. Obviously, I'm gonna call it the Lovecraft did play a role in some of your writing, but
you
like
might
how?
be correct.
How and like who else maybe? Like are you a literary guy? Do you read other writers besides Lovecraft?
So I am an all-around horror guy.
Okay,
I've got a massive PS2 horror collection, like back that way somewhere. I love horror games. I've done those forever. And I think it was shortly before the pandemic, I had started doing Audible. And so I've got like a 35-minute commute to work. So I can kill a decent book in 2 weeks. So I have been consistently listening to a book for like 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Off and on. And I, as a matter of fact, that was when I got Audible. I was listening to books long before that. I was actually paying whatever the $35 it was for an audiobook long before that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, tons and tons of books. I love, and what's funny is like a friend of mine also really likes the Lovecraft stuff. But like what we talk about all the time is like the Cthulhu stuff and the old god stuff. Like that's cool and I dig it. And that's what got me into it in the first place. But like stuff like the Beast in the Cave or oh shoot. Why can I never remember the name of a thing when I'm trying to remember it? It's the I'm trying to remember the name of the story where the guy has the family curse and nobody reaches the age of like 32 before they die. I'll think of it later. It'll come to me later when I'm not trying to think about it. But yeah, like those that seem to be the Lovecraft stories that like after I sort of got through all the Cthulhu stuff and the Dunwich Horror and stuff like that, and Innsmouth. Like once I got through all of that stuff, like it was those stories that I found really interesting. Those sort of personal or just kind of weird stories. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have a song about the Dunwich Horror on Silence Out of Hell, and we've got a story about another Lovecraft story that I can't think of the name of right now. But it is also Scream Evil from Arise. And I've got some other ones planned as well. Because they're just so like the way the stories end is just so neat that it kind of lends itself to making an interesting song. I listen to a lot of Nick Cutter. He's done The Deep, The Troop, some of that stuff. Hell House, Richard Matheson stuff. I mean, yeah, tons and tons of horror books. I'm actually listening to Brian Lumley right now. He did a lot of Cthulhu Mythos stories. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, it's pretty much that and James Bond books are like the two things that I dig on pretty recently. So yeah, tons of horror books, tons of horror video games, James Bond, everything else.
Heck yeah. We were talking about inspiration for your project, and we touched on Lovecraft and all sorts of other wonderful audiobooks that you had been listening to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm curious about is what other forms of media inspire you, whether film, television, could be anything, sculptures, paintings, whatever inspires you in your writing.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the age of Blockbuster Video, right? So there's tons of, there was always a nice cult classic section. We had a Hollywood Video out here, and we had a really nice cult classic section. So I got exposed to a lot of those really, really good, really cheesy horror movies very early on. The Evil Dead franchise was, as a matter of fact, one of the first series of horror movies that I got to watch. So that was really great. And we've got a song off of our latest album called Dead by Dawn, which is based on Evil Dead. I love I was actually just recently talking about this for the record company that we're a part of, Horror Shock Records. They're doing some questionnaires and they want us to film some stuff. But I will use any opportunity where people will listen to talk about Event Horizon, which may be in fact one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, it's great.
It's got the perfect amount of like Sam Neill overacting and like the perfect amount of like, what the hell am I watching? And like I feel like it really made a good case later down the road when the Dead Space games came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I definitely know that this is a thing for me. Like space horror is where it's at for me, I found out. So much so that we wrote a 6-song EP about it. But I love Event Horizon. It's just so weird and gross and great and cheesy and just it's got all the parts I love. It's got all the parts I love. I love, and it's hard to see back there, but I have the blanket of the town map of the original Silent Hill back there.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love Silent Hill. As a matter of fact, I just completed my Silent Hill collection, so I've got them all. and there was just we're in Pittsburgh here, and we just had the Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Con, and they had one of the not so great Silent Hills there, but I didn't have it, so it needs to be in the collection.
Right.
Yeah, I love Silent Hill 2. That's, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best horror games of all time. And every time I play it, it's one of those ones where you're like, oh, like it's like Resident Evil. Like the acting's cheesy, so like you can't really get too emotionally invested, right? And then you get to the end of the game, and I'm like, I've played this 14 times. Why am I still crying? So like horror movies and horror games on top of all the audiobooks. I mean, those are the things that when I was growing up were really the things that got me into horror as a genre. As you can tell by my Friday the 13th shirt, I'm also a Jason guy. Love Friday the 13th, love Nightmare on Elm Street. I love the first two Hellraisers. The song Bloody Hands from our first album is about Hellraiser. The song 13 is about Friday the 13th. But yeah, I mean, just there are probably more songs in our catalog written about horror movies that I grew up watching than almost anything else. Because in the last few years, I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, a lot more stories are about becoming more about those things. But I'm like almost exclusively, other than, I think we've got, I did a whole trilogy of Silent Hill songs on Silence Out of Hell. And we've got a song about Dead Space. And we actually just did, for the Horror Punks Not Dead compilation, did a song called Where Darkness Sleeps, which is about Alan Wake, which is another one of my very, very favorite video games. It's a super Stephen King weird and feels a lot like Twin Peaks. Very, very strange, very awesome. Another one that I'm a big fan of. And because I play so many horror games, and it's a joke that I'm sure if anybody watches some horror videos on YouTube, you'll know that they always put paintings in horror games, like PC horror games and stuff like that, where they're like, well, this is free, we'll put this up. So and I think I have, hold on, let me see if it should be right here. I have become obsessed with Saturn eating his son.
Oh yeah, I love that.
My brother got me this patch. But it's the go-to, like, we don't want to have to pay for a painting, so we're going to put it in this horror game.
Yeah.
And it's just become one of those things that every time I our guitar player Adam actually bought me a shirt that just had that on it. And I just for no reason, I just wear it because it's awesome. Like unnecessary. It's great and I love it, but it's more about its memedom to me than it is. Yeah. It's, again, still a great painting, but
for sure.
Not as much inspirational as I'm like, I love this. I need to have this around at all times.
Oh no, for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's like a piece of art that just sticks with you, and whether it's like the catalyst for your, artistic creation or not, it just resonates with you. And you're
absolutely. Yeah. When you look at it and you're like, that's just so incredibly metal. Like, how do you not like that?
For sure. So horror games, obviously, like you're saying, obviously a big inspiration. What would you say would be then your, I'm going to do it, top three horror games?
Top three. Okay. First of all, we got to go Silent Hill 2 at the top. I know for a lot of people that like Silent Hill, like that's like an easy one and it's a cop out or whatever. Yeah. Silent Hill 2 is pretty great. Ooh. Man, this is tough.
Yeah.
This is a tough question.
For the audience, I told him I wouldn't put him on the spot about anything. I lied, I guess.
Right?
I don't know.
But see, and that's the problem when you're like way too into stuff. You're like, well, do I say this one because I like this part about it? Or do I like this thing? Bloodborne, which I've got represented back here. That was my first FromSoft game. And that was another thing where I didn't know anything about that game when I got into it. And when it does the flip about halfway through, I was like, okay. this game was clearly made for me. And I got into a lot of the From Software games through that, and so that sort of sparked that whole problem. And I'm gonna go, the last one. There's so many I could pick, and they're so well known that like I feel like I just like, even though it's probably not in my top 3, I'm just gonna say it. I love boomer shooters and I love horror games. I'm gonna say Cultic, and if you've never played it, it's fantastic. It's you're basically fighting against a cult and they raise a demon and you got to kill it and all that stuff. But it is vintage like blood and doom and that kind of stuff. But it's just really, really well done. It's fun. A lot of those older, like a lot of those boomer shooter styles, they kind of, there's too much happening. Like you stick in a level too long, or you're trying to do something too much, and it just kind of lose the thread a little bit. And Cultic is perfect for that. The levels are not super short, but they're short enough where you're not feeling like you're there all day and things like that. But yeah, probably not on my top 3, but I feel like it's one that people need to know about.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out. I've heard of that game actually before, but I haven't had the ability to play it yet. And so when you said that, I was nodding along because I was like, oh yeah, that rings a bell. You know, I've seen some clips of it on YouTube or whatever. So I'm gonna check that out afterwards. Thank you.
It's pretty great.
Let's talk about playing shows, and specifically who have you played with recently, or maybe not even recently, but who have you played with or even not played with that's a band that you feel deserves a shout out and a little extra attention that maybe fans of yours would also like?
Sure. Well, what's funny is that we have actually never played a show.
Okay.
I just got we just were recently added to Horror Shock Records, and so was the Creepy Crawlers. They're a band from Dayton, Ohio, which is about 3.5 hours from here. But we're actually setting up a show for our CD release party in May. Hopefully in May. If somebody from Horror Shock is watching, you can tell me when that happens. But we're setting up a CD release show, and then we're doing another show out in Dayton. So we actually have 0 shows in the books. But there are bands from the scene that I absolutely love. We actually collaborated with Jason and talked to Ryan from Boogeyman. I love those dudes. Their lead guitar
Shout out,
player.
guys.
Yeah, hey.
They actually shouted you out when they came on the show.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. See, I'm not that terrible. But no, their lead guitar player is a friend of mine from, we were tiny, and so Dom introduced me to those guys, and I had been listening to them for a lot longer before that. But yeah, I love those dudes. As of the day of this recording, the new Pumpkin Guts record came out. I was checking that out. Literally, I was like doing dishes right before we came down to do this, and I was listening to that. I'm like, that's great. I love Rip Snorter. Those guys are also on Horror Shock, but again, another one I've been listening to for a very long time. I love the Panic Broadcast. I actually just reached out to those dudes, and I know you had mentioned when we talked initially that you had actually done an interview with those guys. But I love that. Like, and it was something that I wasn't expecting. Like when you hear the opening, you're like, I don't know how this is, like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this, and not for any bad reason. Like, I just don't know where it's headed. And I'm pretty sure that I've listened to Entrails of the Dead. I've probably listened to that like 200 times. In
Oh,
the
it's
last,
so
like,
good.
It's so incredible. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, damn it, like, why can't I write a cool song like that? But I reached out to them and I was like, hey, we should work on something together because like I like your stuff a lot.
Yeah. No, the main songwriter behind that, he's absolutely great. He's a wonderful guy, and
Cool.
he has a ton of music that he's got acoustically written out that he
that's
hasn't
cool.
even gotten yet up in like a fully recorded version of. He's working on something.
I'm waiting for that, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, Creepy Crawlers, will be, like I said, we'll be playing with them. Those guys are awesome. I love Evelyn's Casket, another band that, like, you know, I had sort of started listening to some of the more niche bands in the genre, and like they kept popping up, and I'm like, well, let's check it out. And yeah, I mean, Silent Horror, another one. I feel like those guys are pretty popular. But yeah, like there's just so many, and like I can sit here and name 15 other bands that like I just absolutely adore. Because that's the thing, is like when I hear somebody like Panic Broadcast or Boogeyman or Creepy Crawlers, when they make something where I'm like, damn, I wish I wrote that. That inspires me to try not to make that same song, but try to get a song to that level.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you that question. I've asked it to a couple people that have come on the show, and a lot of times people are very polite and they're like, well, I don't want to, whatever, everyone does their own thing. But there are some songs when you hear it, you're just like, exactly what you said. Damn, I wish I had wrote that. And I'm so curious. Other than Entrails of the Dead from the Panic Broadcast, if it can be any band, it doesn't even have to be horror punk, but like, what songs would you say are those songs that you go, damn, I wish I had written that one? Because those are the ones, like you said, that really are inspiring.
Yeah. I know that Infected by Rip Snorter, that was another one that I listened to hundreds of times the first time I heard it. That was one where I was like, damn, man, like what a simple but a completely 100% effective song. Like, it's got the right melody, everything flows really nice. You listen to it, and like I usually make this face where I'm like, damn, like every time. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. All Hollows by Evelyn's Casket, or is that right?
Are you thinking of Sleepy Hollow?
Yes, yeah, Sleepy Hollow, that's right. I'm sorry, All Hollows is the AFI song.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's another one where it's like, man, what a perfectly paced song.
Yeah,
it accomplishes everything it needs to accomplish. It's catchy. There's even a really cool, interesting bridge section. Comes back into that really nice chorus again and finishes it off. Like, damn, man. Whew. Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
There's just there's so many, and that's the thing. It would be one thing if you were listening to a band that you like kind of liked, and you put the record down and stop listening to it or whatever, and you're like, that was all right. But it seems like every band in this scene that I really find that I like, there's always one song where I was like, shit, man, that's perfect. Like you like, whether they knew it or not, like it was the perfect length. They phrased it perfectly. Everything sounds exactly like you would imagine that band to sound like. And I live for that. I live for that, because like, it's the whatever, the old commercial, like I'm not just writing this music, I'm part of the listening crew, or like it's like I love listening to this stuff just as much as I love making it. And that's what makes it so much fun, is that like it's an internal competition with myself. Like I get to hear somebody make a great song that I adore, and then I go, okay, how do I achieve with what I can do to make something that makes me feel like that song makes me feel.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. And this is the thing. I've been saying this for a little while now. Right now, there are so many different bands coming either into the scene, or maybe they've been here a little while, but like they're not all copies and clones, right?
No.
Like they're not all Misfits clones, they're not all
Right.
AFI clones or whatever. Nothing wrong with that, like that's
Sure.
a whole thing. But like so many bands are coming in with these unique and interesting sounds, and everyone is, and I think it's because partially everyone's isolated and no one
Right.
is telling them you have to sound like this to
Right.
be horror punk. And
Right.
so all these great bands are coming with all these cool songs, and it's just like such a cool time to be a part of specifically this genre. I
It
like
really
to
is.
say that horror punk isn't a musical genre so much as it is a literary genre, right?
Yeah, I
Like
could see that.
there's like as long as you stay on the spooky or the horror topics,
Right.
like there are
Yeah.
metal guys, there
Right.
are those 3-chord dirty punk songs that we were talking
Mhm.
about earlier. I've heard ska bands and well,
Right.
obviously rockabilly. You can't
Right.
like
Right.
that's gonna be there. But like I've heard grunge bands. I've even like I know that there's a line where people are like, okay, well that's like the horrorcore hip hop stuff doesn't really
Right.
count,
Right.
or like the murder folk stuff doesn't really count. But sometimes it's like drawing that line where it's like you sound like Flogging Molly, but you also sound like you're the Misfits, right? Like how
Right,
am I supposed to parse that?
Right.
know?
Yeah. Like, it's like, I always think of it as like a metal subgenre thing. It's like, yeah, you can talk subgenres all day, but at the end of the
Mhm.
day, if I think it's horror punk, that's what it is to me.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like
exactly.
there are plenty of, like you said, there are plenty of bands and songs where you're like, I don't know, is this horror punk? Is this not
Yeah.
horror punk? And then you go,
Yeah.
it is to me. So
right.
yeah, like whatever, it's great.
Mhm. For sure.
But-
For sure.
And like with like we were just talking about Pumpkin Guts earlier. I was listening to that new
So
EP,
good.
and like it's very poppy. And
Mhm.
like some people are afraid to say that, because it's a spooky subgenre, and we're not supposed to like the pop music. But it really is. It feels like pop punk
Mhm.
injected with horror punk.
Oh,
And
and you know what?
it's
I'm
so
unapologetic about it. Like unapologetic
yeah.
about it. I say go for it. There's a history of pop punk bands writing horror punk songs. I'm
Oh, yeah.
thinking, go all the way back to the Ramones doing Pet Cemetery. You
Right.
know, like whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's a whole thing. And
Honestly, let your influences show up. Like I don't care. Like
yeah,
if you can make good music, I don't care if your influences are from, because I'm an old hip hop dude. Like
Yeah.
I love Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that. Like you're not scaring me away with that stuff. So
Yeah.
like do whatever. Like find the things that make what you're adding to this genre. Find the
Mhm.
things that make that interesting and just do it.
yeah,
Because
yeah, for sure.
those are the bands that I and the songs that I seem to gravitate towards,
Mhm.
where it's like you've taken this thing that we all know and you've turned it into something else while still retaining the thing that people like about it.
Oh yeah, they're totally injecting new blood into it, new ideas.
Yeah.
And like and that's the thing, like we were saying, right? Like the scene isn't stale right now. Everyone,
Right.
there's this like renaissance in like new ideas and sounds, and these things come in waves, but like I
Sure.
don't know, man. I'm just saying, like, this is a great time to be a part of it, one way or
Give
the
me
other.
a surfboard, man. I'll ride the
Yeah.
wave.
For sure. For sure. All right. So I've been having a blast talking. Right now, let's give some shout outs to your social media.
Sure.
Where do you want people to go to listen to your music, and how can they best support you? Is Bandcamp good, or do you want them to go to Spotify, or where do you want them
Bandcamp
to go?
is great. If you're willing to buy music, please, by all means. We've made it significantly cheaper on our Bandcamp to buy our music. So if you buy it digitally from iTunes and all that stuff, it's still available. But it's I think like $2 cheaper to buy from us on Bandcamp. And that's where all of our extra merch is. CDs. We did a small pressing of tapes. We have some of those available as well, and some patches and
That's
some other
really
stuff.
cool.
So if you're looking for merch from us, that's your best place to find it, which is risefromyourgrave.bandcamp.com. Believe me, it took me a long time to remember that. Facebook and Instagram are the only two places you'll find us. There is, or I think there was, a metal band from Texas called Rise from Your Grave. We're not from Texas. We're from Pittsburgh. So if you find us on Facebook and Instagram, those are the, like I said, two best places to find us. Everywhere else, you won't find us there. And yeah, we're on Spotify. I mean, anything that you can stream, we're there. Just if you like it, listen to it. I'm not gonna e-beg for you. I'm not gonna beg you to buy our stuff. If you enjoy it and you want to buy it, please do. Otherwise, just keep listening to the songs. That just makes me happy.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do it. People at home. All right. I've said this almost every show, and I'm going to continue to say it. If an artist has music for sale, you're not morally obligated to buy it or anything like that. But if you like what they're doing, go support them. Go spend the money on that, because even if they're doing it for passion, which a lot of these artists are doing, it makes it easier for them to continue to afford to do this, to make the music. So go, if you can, go and buy that, digital copy, or buy a CD or a tape, buy what you can and support these bands, support them, and, help them grow. Yeah, you can share their stuff on social media too. You can give them Spotify listens. But I know as a musician myself, amateur or not, that the support that has helped me both continue to do what I'm doing, as well as, reassured me that I'm kind of on a right track, that an audience actually likes it, is when people are saying, hey, I would buy that. I don't really care if people pay for the music personally, but what it tells me is that you value my work, and in this case, you would value their work. And so if you value it enough to pay for it, please do. If you value it enough to pay for it, but you can't, go stream it. Go give them those likes and shares on Facebook. Don't feel pressured to do something you can't do, but if you are able to and you want to, please do, because I can tell you from personal experience, it really helps an artist be able to afford to continue to create the art you love if you support them.
Absolutely.
So with that said, anyways, are there any dates or anything coming up that you want to talk about?
So our latest album, Cryptid Creature Feature, is to tentatively be dropped this May. And we will also be doing a CD release show here in Pittsburgh. The date, as of this recording, is still up in the air, but it will be happening in May. So you can expect to see that. We'll be doing a CD release and a tape as well. And maybe sometime between now and then we'll have shirts. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on here. I appreciate you coming on, and I'll see you later.
Thanks, Will. It was great.
All right. Thank you so much for staying to the end of the episode. I really appreciate it. My name is William Hamilton, and I've been the host of this episode of Heartfelt Horror here on the Heartfelt Horror Media Network channel. We really do appreciate you guys staying to the end of these videos. While you're here, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video, subscribing to our channel, leaving a comment down below, these little things really do go a long way to helping us, get our name out there and get our show out into the algorithm so other people like you can find us. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, we'd really appreciate it. Also, if you're looking for other ways to support the show, we have a Patreon. The link for that is going to be down here. You can copy that into the search bar and you'll find our page. Our Patreon is for $5 a month. For $5 a month, you're going to be able to help us buy all sorts of new equipment. You're going to help us be able to save up for different kind of developmental processes that we're going to be using to bring you new and different kinds of content besides these interviews. So if that sounds like something that interests you, please consider it. Again, it'll be $5, and the link to the Patreon is going to be down there below. So thank you so much for your time, and have a nice day. Bye.